Welcome to Easy Peasy Books, From Author to Authority, the lively and engaging podcast for business professionals who've always believed they have a book in them. I'm your host, Gillian Whitney. Join me as I chat with authors and industry experts from all around the world to explore simple strategies to write, publish, and leverage your business book. Whether you're an entrepreneur, executive, or an employee, this podcast is for you. Woohoo! And we're live once again on another Tuesday, and it's a new year. So it's a new year, new show, new topic, and I'm all by my lonesome today, but I got Bitmo Gillian. She's going to be joining me today, and we're going to be talking about, I'm going to go ahead and pull up my graphic, to be or not to be in bookstores. That is the question. And for anybody who doesn't know me, I am a book nut, which means that I absolutely love and adore bookstores. So ever since I was a kid, I've been reading books all my whole life. And whenever I go somewhere, I go to a bookstore. As a matter of fact, this weekend we went to New Orleans and we were in the Garden District and we were doing a walking tour. And on the walking tour, we got to stop off at a bookstore. And it was like a fabulous independent bookstore. It had Anne Rice books because she lived in the Garden District. It had New Orleans books, local books. So I love independent bookstores. So you would just naturally think that once I made that jump to becoming an author, the first thing that I'd want to do is get my books in a bookstore. And that was the goal until I learned some stuff. So I'm going to talk about sort of what I've learned along my journey, because for the most part, I think people don't tell us the full story. So I like to tell people the full story so that we can all make an informed decision and so I'm going to go through all of the things that I've learned so that you can make a decision on whether bookstores are right for you. So I'm just going to get stuck right in. Okay. So the first thing is, if you're like me, you probably started, or maybe you're just starting, or you haven't even started yet. But most of us start with Amazon. So we get our book up to Amazon, and that's sort of the first step. It's like, okay, you've written the book. Now you got to have the book all typeset and layouts nice and this and that. And then we start with Amazon because, hey, Amazon's like, I think it's like 80 to 90% of the market of books is through Amazon now. So love Amazon or hate Amazon. That's the reality. So if you want, it's an easy peasy way to get started with books. So I highly recommend getting on Amazon. It's a no-brainer. It's easy. It doesn't cost you anything. And it's just a very, very sweet and reliable setup. So there's just so many good things I can say about Amazon. So I love Amazon. And it is a bookstore. It is a big online bookstore, but we're talking about brick-and-mortar bookstores. So we're talking about the Barnes and Nobles and then the independent ones like I just talked about at the Garden District down in New Orleans. We're talking about all those bookstores. So the first thing is people will tell you, oh, yes, just get your book up to Amazon and bookstores will go ahead and order from Amazon. No, they don't. And the reason they don't is they don't want to pay the shopping cart fees. Like you think about it, when you price your book on Amazon, you're going for the retail price, and other bookstores, first of all, they want deep discounts before they'll carry your book. And also too, Amazon is their competitor. So most bookstores don't want anything to do with Amazon. So you need to think outside the box if you want to get into the bookstore. So just getting your book straight up on Amazon, retail book, your paperback, your hardback, whatever, even your Kindle book, having all those Amazon does not get you into a bookstore. So then the question is, okay, what else? Well, Amazon has this thing called expanded distribution. And this is something that I looked into because it said, oh, this allows you to get your books out to bookstores and libraries. And I thought, oh, okay, well, that kind of makes sense. And that was the first sort of avenue I looked into and did some research. So it actually does offer a wholesale price, which is what the bookstores want. Because you have to think about the bookstores. They're in it to make money. So if they buy it at the retail price, What are they going to do? Mark it up? Well, then they can't compete with Amazon. Why would anybody ever buy their books? So you have to keep those prices down at a wholesale discount. Otherwise, the bookstores, they can't make any money, and they need to make money. That only makes sense. So Amazon does, through this expanded distribution, which is just in the US and UK, so it doesn't go any further than that. And actually, Amazon doesn't even do this. It's offered through Amazon, but it's actually outsourced to Ingram Spark. So that means more hands are involved, which means more money gets distributed to Amazon and now also to Ingram Spark. So there's this like 60% royalty, 60% that Amazon and Ingram Spark is like saying that goes to the bookstore. It doesn't go to the bookstore. They get a shorter discount than that. It's called a short discount. And it's quite frankly, it's not enough. The bookstores are like, it's not good enough for us. So by the time Ingram takes their cut and Amazon takes their cut, there's just not enough of a discount to count as a wholesale for your bookstores. On top of that, you only get 40% royalties, which isn't very much. And it's only paperback. So if you have a hardback, it doesn't even count. So you think about it and you go, well, what's the point of even doing this expanded distribution? And pretty much if you just Google it, nobody does. So nobody uses expanded distribution on Amazon. Just cross that off your list right now. So if you're going to go to who Amazon outsources their expanded distribution to, you go to Ingram Spark. So why not just go to Ingram Spark yourself, which you absolutely can. Now, Ingram Spark, there's other places, of course, but Ingram Spark is kind of the place to go. So you think online books, you think of Amazon for like all the big stuff. Ingram Spark is the one that everybody goes to because 40,000 bookstores, libraries, retail outlets, worldwide distribution. Like it's an amazing place. So it makes sense to go to Ingram Spark. It doesn't cost you anything. At one time, it actually cost you to set up an account and upload your books, but it doesn't cost you anything anymore. So it's free to set up an account. It's free to upload your books. You do have to pay for changes. So I think you got like a 60-day time limit. But then if you start doing revisions, you have to pay for each and every revision that you upload. So it's just something to keep in mind. And with Ingram Spark, just know that it's not quite as easy as Amazon. Amazon really is easy. So it's like there's still a lot of balls to juggle when you're doing Amazon, but it's really straightforward. And when you all of a sudden go over to Ingram Spark and you're just like, oh, now the cover doesn't work, I gotta redo my cover. There's just so many things and there's so many boxes that you're like, what does this mean? What does this mean? It's not as user friendly as Amazon. So you have to be very careful when you're using Ingram Spark, because if you tick wrong boxes, you can get into trouble. Plus, I'm going to tell you from personal experience, I'm using Ingram Spark now. I have found it is so slow. I uploaded a book the beginning of December. I wanted to do a hardback just to test it out. And I'm still waiting for my proof. It's been weeks and weeks and weeks. So this is not a fast system. Amazon, lickety split, you got your proof. It's really, really quick. Ingram Spark, if you were trying to meet like some sort of book launch date, it's going to be a challenge. So Ingram Spark, it's got really great wide distribution, but there are costs. Now, and this is the vague part that a lot of people don't tell you about. They say, oh, upload your book to Ingram Spark and you'll be in the catalog and 40,000 bookstores, libraries, and retail outlets will get your book. Well, just because you're in the catalog does not necessarily mean that a bookstore is going to order your book. So there's one thing to be in the catalog and another thing to actually get your book in the bookstore. So when it's in the catalog for Ingram Spark, it means that anybody in the bookstore could go to the catalog, see your book, and order your book. So if you tell people, go to your local bookstore and order my book, technically, people can do that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that Barnes & Noble says, oh, Gillian Whitney's published a book. Look, I see it in the catalog. Let's order 100 copies for, our top 10 stores across the country. It doesn't happen like that. So just because it's in the catalog does not mean bookstores are ordering it. So that's something to think of. So When you work with Ingram Spark, there's a couple of things that you need to know about. First of all, you have to have an ISBN number. ISBN is an international standard book number, and in the United States, you get it through Bowker. I think if you're in the UK, you get it through Nielsen's. Australia gets it through Bowker. And then other than that, it's country specific. If you're in Canada, they're free. So it's kind of cool. But in the United States, they're not free. So I think they're 125, 150, something like that. You can buy a block of 10 and it's a little bit cheaper, but you actually need an ISBN for every single format of your book. So you would need one for the paperback edition, and you would need one from the hardback edition. And if you've already published your book on Amazon and you used your own ISBN, it's great because you take that book, that ISBN goes with the book. So it doesn't matter if you go to Ingram Spark. You don't have to buy a whole bunch of new ISBNs. You can use the same ones that you used on Amazon. But if you use the Amazon free ISBN, which I recommend to first-time authors because you've got so much you're doing that, like, to start buying a block of 10 ISBNs and you've never even done a book before, that's a big leap for people. So it's like to go and invest in an ISBN, especially if you're doing paperback, hardback, whatever, Kindle, all these different ones. It makes you go, that's a lot of money I'm investing in these, ISBNs. So if you've used the free one with Amazon that Amazon graciously gives you, the catch is it ties you to Amazon. You can't take that with you. Somebody likens it to, like, if you go to a hotel and you use their sheets, when you leave the sheets behind. It's the same sort of idea. So it comes with the place, comes with Amazon, but you can't take it with you. So if you go over to Ingram Spark, now all of a sudden you have to make sure that you own your own ISBN. So that's a cost. You also have to set your book at a 40% discount for the bookstores because you're an unknown, you're a risk, and they don't want, and also on top of that, they want to make money. Bookstores want to make money. So you really have to set that good discount, that deep discount of 40% to the bookstores, or they're just not going to order your book because there's just not enough margin for them to make a profit. But here's the kicker. You also have to make your book returnable. And what that means is that bookstores, they have limited shelf space. And so if they order some of your books, it's not like print on demand. So that's what we do on Amazon. Somebody buys your book, Amazon prints it, ships it to them. With bookstores, they actually physically ship the books to the bookstores. They put the book in the bookstores. And then what happens is, if the book doesn't sell, the bookstore wants their money back. And if you don't make your book returnable, most bookstores will have nothing to do with you. So that can be very costly. So let me take you through that. So we talked about an ISBN. It has to be owned by you. Let's talk about the wholesale. So before I get into the returnable, I want to talk about that wholesale. So I said you have to give 40% discount to the bookstores. So that means you actually have to select a 55% discount with Ingram Spark because Ingram wants their cut too. So there's 15% goes to Ingram, 40% goes to the bookstore, which means you only get 45% royalties. So that's what you get, when you look at the pie of, how everything is going here. So less royalties for you when you think about if you're up on Amazon and, 60% royalties versus, 45% royalties, or even if you talk about ebooks, like 70% royalties are amazing. So then we have to talk about returnable. So you have two options, and this is where a lot of people make the mistake of, first of all, you have to check returnable. And then when you get to returnable, you have to say, returnable, deliver back to me. I want the books. If they get returned, I want them delivered back to me, or destroy the books. And you might be thinking, oh my gosh, why on earth would we ever destroy the books? I'm going to tell you why. Okay, so if you say, I want this book to be returnable, but deliver back to me, here's what you have to do is you have to give them back the wholesale price of the book. So remember, the cost of the book is now minus 55%. That's the wholesale price of the book. And then you have to pay a shipping fee back to them. Now, if it's in your country, so like I'm in the United States, if I have it shipped back to me in the United States, it's $3 per book. If I have it from international, it's $20 by book. And so you can see how this could be quite expensive if we're not talking one or two copies. If you have books, remember, we have thousands and thousands of bookstores all over the world that these books could be at. And you can't control. You can't just say, okay, I only want Barnes and Noble in like Las Vegas. It's like it goes out in the catalog. So anybody in the catalog, if you have set that region that you want to have your book in that region, anybody in that region can buy your book. And so this can get very, very costly, and especially if you're talking about shipping from international, $20 a book. So, just say for instance, you had 100 books, you start thinking about, oh my gosh, so I'm not what I get paid as a royalty. It's the wholesale price of the book. So I'm losing money on the deal and I'm paying for shipping. So that can get very, very costly. And the thing that so many people recommend is you actually say, destroy the books. So if the bookstore can't sell your book, they've been there for 6 months, 9 months, a year, however long they decide, okay, this book is not selling here, then if you go with the destroy my book, you won't get that book back. And usually what they do is they just rip off the cover, and that's how they destroy the book. And then they send the covers back to Ingram, and everybody gets paid, reimbursed. But it's horrible to think about your book being destroyed. It's a terrible thing. But on the other hand, having it delivered to you could be really, really expensive. So lots to think about there. So I kind of wanted to just, give some examples, and I'm terrible at math, which is why I had to put up a slide that kind of walks you through, because a lot of people are like, okay, I don't understand this. This is so confusing. So I'm hoping I can break this down for everybody. So this is an example off Ingram's website. So it made the math real easy for me. And they talked about an example of having a 400-page book, 6x9. It's typical, industry trade size, 6x9-inch book, and starting with a retail price of $25.99. So by time you do the discount of 55%, now the wholesale price, this is the price that the bookstore is going to pay for it, is $11.70. Now, you also have to factor in, what does it cost to print this book? So this book costs $7.14 to print, a 400-page black and white book, just a paperback, not a hardback, nothing special, not in color, just black and white. So when you do all the math, the compensation to you as the publisher, as the author, is $4.56. So customers paying $25.99. The bookstore is paying $11.70. So they're marking it up, and that's their profit margin. And now your compensation for this $25.99 book is $4.56, which is like not a lot. It's not a lot of compensation. But if your heart's into a bookstore, that's probably a reality. Now, I wanted to just show you the cost of the returns. If the bookstore says, I don't want this book anymore, and they ship them all back. So you would have to pay the bookstore back $11.70 in the United States, plus $3. So now you're paying back $14.70, but you only made $4.56. So you can see it's costing you $10, about, thereabouts, $10 you're looking at out of your own pocket to pay back the bookstore. Now you get the book, but okay, great. Now multiply that by 100. You got 100 books sitting in your house, and now you're going to have to go out and sell those books yourself. So that's something to think about. And if you tick the box by accident and you had international orders, now you're looking at $11.70, which is the wholesale price that you'd have to reimburse the bookstore for, plus $20 per book. So now we're talking about $31.70. And you're just like, oh my gosh. And I'm telling you, there are horror stories of people that have just 100 books, and all of a sudden they're getting a bill for $1,200 that they got to pay back. And it's like, it's a horror. So that's a huge risk that you could be having to take on with this. So it's lots to think about. I don't know. To be honest with you, when I kind of saw all those little details, I thought, I don't think it's worth it. I really don't think it's worth it. And I then began looking for alternatives. I'll tell you what those alternatives are in a second. But me personally, I said, as much as I love bookstores, I was not willing to take the cut in the compensation and the royalties, and then the risk with having my book having to be returnable. And to be honest with you, I don't think I could stand the thought of my books being ripped up and thrown away. I think it would just break my heart. So it was not for me. It was not for me when I saw that. So another thing that I want everybody to keep in mind is how bookstores actually even operate. Because with traditional publishers, they got a whole sales team. They got people that are like, we're talking about the McGraw-Hills and all those big publishers. They got people that are going out to these bookstores and they are in there, with deep pockets and lots of money, and they're getting their books placed where they want to have their books. And sometimes that's 6 months, 9 months out. So you just have to remember that you're working against people that that are traditional publishers. Maybe the author is a celebrity. So it's like I'm competing with Michelle Obama to get my book in the bookstore. Guess who's going to win? It's not going to be me. So, and then on top of that, there's even a whole thing in bookstores of spine out or front out. And so that essentially means here's G's book. Okay. So this is front out. You go to a bookstore and you see pockets, end caps, you see tables with the whole front of the book showing. That's because those people paid for it. The distributors paid for it. Most of the time we're going to be in a bookstore with spine out. So if you have a little teeny book, you just have to imagine your book is only being seen by the spine in a sea of books. So it's kind of like, I don't know, how much is that really going to be, helping you in terms of sales? And like, what if the staff shelve it in the wrong area? Nobody even sees your book. So it's just like, oh gosh, I don't know. I don't know if it's worth it for that. And then as a self-published person, now you are the one that's going to the bookstore and saying, hey, I'd like you to carry my book. And it can't, there's many different reasons why a bookstore would want to carry your book. Maybe you're going to assure them that there's going to be lots of sales because I'm going to come and I'm going to do a book event. I'm going to do a signing. I'm going to bring a whole load of customers in for you. It's like the bookstore's going to look at you and say, what's in it for me? That totally makes sense that a bookstore is going to do that. What's in it for me? So you have to kind of go, and you should have a media kit and other things that you could leave behind to convince them this book is great. Lots of reviews. This book is selling hotcakes on Amazon. Look at all these different sales I'm having. You want to convince those bookstores. So that's something. And the other thing is, do you want to do book tours, media things? There's a lot that will go into that whole PR of getting your book in bookstores as well. So something to think about. So I said I would talk to you about some of the alternatives. So one of the alternatives is consignment. So if you have your book, go to your local bookstore. Go to the one that's, you might not want to start off with like the big box ones like Barnes and Nobles, but go to a bookstore that might be in your area and you tell them, I'm a local author. I just wrote this book. And consignment means you could give them 5 copies, 10 copies, and ask them, would you like my book? And the deal would be that you would give them a discount, but you'd only be paid after the books are sold. And sometimes you can work out a deal. You'll leave them for 6 months. You're not going to keep good records. Of course, you don't want to lose your books, but you can go ahead and keep good records. And then that way it's like you can say in 6 months, I'll come back and pick it up. Now there's no shipping costs. Now you don't have to worry about destroying your book. So that's a much easier way to go. And also think outside the bookstore. The bookstore doesn't have to be a local bookstore. It could be something that's related. So say, for instance, you do a travel book. Maybe you want to have it it with like a clothing store that does travel items, and your book could go in there. Or maybe you did a book about dogs, and so maybe your book would be good to have in a pet store. There's so many different things that you can think outside the box with consignment. So I think that's a better way to go. And you're probably best to try and give them that deep discount, but now you're not paying Ingram and other people in between. It's just between you and the bookstore. So you will get more royalties because it's just cutting the deal with the bookstore and you. The other idea is to do what I did. I decided I wanted my book in Barnes & Noble, but I went with Barnes & Noble Press, which means Barnes & Noble Online. And I used my Kindle book. I used my digital book. And so I decided that was the way I would get into bookstores. So I could check it off. Yes, I am in Barnes & Noble. That's all I ever wanted. And it was enough. And I get full royalties on that. So, of course, Barnes & Noble is taking some, but that is a lot better because you could just go, like with an ebook, it's just easy. It's like there's no loss, there's no printing costs. So that's what I did, is I went with Barnes & Noble. So anyways, there we go. That was what I wanted to kind of talk about today. I'll go and see if I have any comments or questions. I feel like I just gave a masterclass here, but it's like I just thought this stuff was so important because these are the things people don't tell you. They just tell you, oh, just put your book up on Ingram Spark and you'll be in bookstores. It's absolutely not true. So I wanted everybody to know that. So I have Jeff here today with me, and he says, hello from snowy Columbus, Ohio. Gillian, namaste. It's cold and snowy everywhere today, guys. It is. Thank you for being here, Jeff. We got Debbie Weems is here, and both of them were on my show last week, which is absolutely wonderful. Thank you for being here today, Debbie. We have Pamela. Hi, all. Pamela's here. Yay. And Debbie says 2 events in one day. I guess they're bebopping from one event to another. So that's awesome. That's awesome. And Jeff says, Debbie, always a pleasure to see you, my friend. Veronica is here. She says, good day. She says, good day. And Kevin says, got to write one first, Gillian Whitney. You do. Kevin, I want to see you having your book done by the end of the year. I'm going to keep bugging you because I just know you have more than one book in you. So you have to get cracking. So we need to talk. And Jeff says, Kevin, you do know that Gillian can help you with that, right? I know. I'm like, just like this little bug. I feel like I'm on the planet here to just get everybody going. Kevin Turner, me too. Good. Maybe we have everybody just being an accountability, and I will make sure that you get on my show and we talk about your book. If you make a goal, then we might have a check-in. Maybe we'll have that would be a fun live, a check-in. How's our books coming along? Amazon is easy peasy if you have someone like you and Devin to help with the process. And, it is overwhelming. And I know that like when we kind of first help people go through Amazon, they're like, oh, there's so much to know. But that's why we always say, start with Amazon. Don't do Amazon plus Ingram plus this plus that. There's other channels you can add later. And so I've just started adding online channels so that I've got my book out on Barnes & Noble and Hoopla and Overdrive. So, because I want to try and get in the libraries, and the libraries is a whole other live. I'll have to do a whole live about libraries, but there's just many ways. I got into iBooks, which is, with iTunes and Mac and stuff like that. So there's other ways, but keep it simple. Just go to Amazon first. Marcia says, nothing is free in the US. Well, it's to be honest with you, I have to say, Amazon, if you said all I wanted to do was a Kindle book and I don't even want to do a paperback, it would not cost you a penny. You would never be out any money. So I think that's what's really cool about Amazon. Even the paperback, it doesn't cost you anything because it's like you set the printing cost and the cost of your book. And so you could be like Jeff. He makes nothing. He makes pennies because we set it for the lowest possible price because Jeff, if he could have, he would have just made his book for free. So he definitely wanted to do that. Marcia says, so many nuggets. Thank you. I'm glad some of this was helpful. Nice. Comprehensive overview of the pros and cons. Yes. And that's what I just want people to have, that information to make the informed choices, because in the beginning I was like so confused when I went, I'm going to demystify this. This is crazy. If we had not used Amazon and with all these hidden costs, I would have had to have a financial sponsor to afford it. Yeah, it's amazing. And I know that there's some people that I know of one woman who got hit with a $1,200 bill. And she said, luckily, she had enough money and she was able to pay it. But she said she actually got turned off, doing bookstores because she said with the amount of work that she had to do to get her book in bookstores and how little the compensation was, and then having this horrible return bill, never mind if you have COVID, when COVID hit, bookstores were turning books left over, hand over fist. So authors were just like, oh my God, I have all these bills. So really, really scary stuff. Dave Cause says, wow, dollars, dollars, dollars. Yes. And we have to be so careful, checking those boxes whenever you're doing anything. If you don't understand what it is, step back and don't just click, click, click. And, and be careful if somebody's clicking on your behalf, make them explain it to you. Don't just, trust. Always make sure you understand. Can you do Ingram Spark and Amazon? Yes, you can. And what you can do is when you go to do Ingram Spark, you turn off Amazon because you've already worked with Amazon. So you don't want Ingram Spark selling your book on Amazon for you because now they're going to take a cut. So you can actually turn off Amazon, which is what I did. And I actually just did it to test because I wanted to say, how does this one work? So far, I'm not that impressed. So I'll wait until I get my book and see how the hard copy looks. The one nice thing that Ingram Spark does that Amazon doesn't is it can actually print a hard copy with a dust cover. That is not something Amazon can do. And you can also do pre-orders. So a lot of people like the pre-orders because you can't do the pre-orders only for Kindles, not for paperback. So that's one reason a lot of people like that. Dave says, great question, Pamela. Good. I'm glad the questions are coming along. Placement similar to Walmart, end caps. Yeah, it's even as an independent author, if you work with a independent bookstore, sometimes you just tell them, what do I have to pay to get full face out? And they'll tell you, $25 a month, and we put you on the local author table, so there's different things. So, sometimes you have to pay to play and sometimes it's just worth it, because in the end, people go to bookstores. Why do they like bookstores? Because you can browse, you can look around. It's like, oh, what's this interesting little book? And you pick it up and you look at it and you only see it if it's full face out. If it's a spine, you probably don't even notice it. So interesting. Love the consignment alternative. Yes, absolutely. And the nice thing is with consignment, I helped an author once and we got all his book in different bookstores across the country, but he wanted to go with independents. And then we put all of the independent bookstores on his website. And then people who like independent bookstores, they felt really good because then they could order it. They could actually order it online through the independent bookstore as well. So just really nice to know that. Love all the alternatives, says Marcia. Another episode of Gillian, 400, 500 levels. Where on Barnes & Noble do we submit a book? My book is done. You go to Barnes. And so if you're talking about the Kindle book, if you're talking about the digital version, you would go to Barnes & Noble Press, and that's how you set up an account and that's how you do it. Or you can go through a company called Draft to Digital. And then that way you can kind of go multiple. So it's like an Ingram Spark, but it's of the ebook version. And so that's actually what I did. I used Draft to Digital, which pushed out to Barnes & Noble, Overdrive, Hoopla, Nook, and some Canadian ones and Books A Million and all these other places. It just went boom, boom, boom everywhere because I thought I don't want to maintain all these accounts. Plus, it also went to iBooks, and I wanted to be in iBooks, and I just didn't want all the accounts, so I just went with Draft to Digital. So two things: Draft to Digital or Barnes & Noble Press. Okay, so I think that's the end. No hardcover. So yeah, you can do a hardcover on Amazon. You can do a hardcover on Ingram Spark as well. So just know you can do hardcovers now on Amazon. You just can't do that dust jacket, that paper and that's kind of really good for fiction books. Like if you have like a big, I don't know, a fantasy novel, Game of Thrones kind of thing, you like those sort of dust jackets. But, for the most part, I think most of us would just rather have the book printed and just be hardcover This is not a hardcover book, so I have no idea why I'm holding it up, but that's what I do. Okay, so I think this is pretty much the end of the road for me, and I'm just going to go ahead and say goodbye to everybody today. And I thank you very much for being here. I hope this was valuable and at least gives you some idea about the bookstores. And I'm never going to tell anybody what to do, but just sort of look before you leap. And my true advice is, really think it through. And make sure, especially if we're talking about a business book, your book is probably not for the general public. And that's why writing your book is always coming down to, why are you writing this book for the first place? And if we're talking about a business book, for the most part, we're writing books to either help people, right? Like your Jeff Youngs, just want to help people. So you wrote your book to just get it out there and help people in the universe, make a difference. And others of us who write a book because we want to either have it as a memoir, as a legacy book, but also to get clients. And so our audience is smaller and it's not the big general population. So Game of Thrones, everybody was reading those kind of books. That's a big, big fantasy novel. The Stephen Kings, they want to go in bookstores. But if you're just a business owner, maybe it's just not appropriate for you because you don't want to work with everybody. So I say for business people, just stick with Amazon first. You can look into other ones later, and go wide later. I love Draft to Digital. I thought that was cool. Ingram Spark is a really nice backup in case anything ever happens with your Amazon account. So it doesn't hurt to have multiple irons in the fire, but really think long and hard before you get into that, and don't click boxes that could end up with a $1,200 bill one day. And you're just like, oops, I should have listened to Gillian. So there we go. Okay. So I'm going to say goodbye to everybody and we'll see you next week. Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Easy Peasy Books, from author to authority. If you found value in today's episode, I'd be grateful if you could leave us a review. It helps other aspiring authors discover our podcast. To learn more about writing, publishing, and leveraging your business book, visit my website at easypeasybooks.com.